everybody. Welcome to the Hallmarkies podcast. And we're really excited today. We are here to talk about the divine Miss Jane Austen and the recent little miniseries they did on Masterpiece, PBS, the Miss Austen series. And I am film critic Rachel Wagner, and Laura Bedore Lerwill is here with me. And thank you so much, Laura, for coming on the podcast.
It's just like, it's like chocolate. Zoom style. It's like, oh, I get to talk about Austen and a movie and fun stuff. Yeah, I was very, very pleased to be asked. This will be great fun.
Well, and the reason I thought of you is that you recently directed and adapted Emma for a local production here that I really admired. And we had you on Stage Blog that I host, their podcast, to talk about it. And so you were somebody I immediately thought of that knows Austen pretty well.
I think this show has a great opportunity to discuss the personal connection we have to Austen, because that was absolutely played out throughout in different characters. And I thought that was a great theme. But then there's also that subtext itself of how, I don't know what the original book was like. I only know what my experience was in watching it. And also then you kind of go, okay, so how much was taken from fact? How much is interpretive fiction? And what were my emotional reactions to all of those?
Yeah. Well, it's hard because, and we'll talk about this more, we don't know that much about Jane. Most of her, and part of the plot of this series is that most of her letters were destroyed. And so we don't know that much about her, unlike some other figures at the time where we have copious letters and a lot more information about what they did.
Yeah, it does beg that question. And it's not a spoiler because it happened. Right. And you can kind of say, okay, well, Cassandra, the eldest Austen, she burned what we theorize. This is the theory, that there's like, 3,000 or something astronomically large of correspondence, and only under 200 were kept, retained, allowed to the public. And that begs the question why. And I'm sure that was what the author, I know her first name's Gill, I can't remember her last name all of a sudden, cheat sheet, but I'm sure that was what sparked her inspiration to write it. And what would those letters have contained? That is a premise alone.
Yeah, I guess cool Cassandra said that it was in the interest of protecting the reputations from Jane's penchant for honesty and forthrightness. Is what she did. And she wanted to ensure that the younger nieces did not read any of Jane's sometimes acid or forthright comments on neighbors or family members. Which, if only Jane had kept a journal.
I think it's interesting too, because if we think about the society in which she wrote, lived, and grew to fame, there was that sense of decorum, right? There was that which you say, that's what you don't say. And it's like, that person walked by me with nary a glance. How rude. I mean, if we're going to be subtle in our insults, to be outward in our insults, and something on page that could then, if you will, tarnish the reputation or the family, or, I mean, it was both a respectful thing, and then we, in our hungry appetite for more of Jane, we were like, how could you deny us all this?
Yeah.
But I mean, if you were a writer and somebody had all your correspondence to your best friend or sisters, would you want that out there?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I get it. And, and she, it's not like Jane Austen was president of the United States or prime minister of England, because where it was like obvious, okay, this is going to have historical significance. She would seen it as more, is this going to have family, more intimate significance? I mean, I think she recognized, because even like, I think it was her nephew wrote a biography. I mean, she was well known at the time, and people had, so it's not like it was nothing, but I don't know. I just think for like a politician or somebody like that, you think, oh, I got to save this for historical. I don't think you necessarily think, oh, my sister, the author, we've got to keep all of this for historical
it preservation. Wouldn't have been that perspective.
Yeah. Ho, ho, ho. We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies Patreon.
Do you love Hallmarkies podcast, especially at Christmas?
Do you enjoy the holiday previews, recaps, interviews, and bonus episodes?
If the answer is yes, please consider supporting the Hallmarkies Patreon. We need your help to do what we do both during the Christmas season and all year round.
But not only do you help a podcast led by strong, independent women by becoming a Patreon, you get to become a part of the Hallmarkies family.
Starting at only $2 a month as a patron, you will have access to our Facebook Patreon group where we talk about the movies, shows, and more all year.
We also have many monthly patron watch-alongs with guests like Lacey Chabert, Natalie Hall, Paul Campbell, Mary Lou Henner, and more, giving their behind-the-scenes details of their films.
As a patron, you also have the chance to provide input into the podcast and even join us at different tiers.
So this Christmas season, spread some cheer to the Hallmarkies Patreon and become a member today. You won't regret it.
Go to patreon.com/Hallmarkies to learn more.
That's patreon.com/Hallmarkies. But let's go a little off the show just for a little bit. I guess, what's your experience with Austen? When did you first become introduced to her works?
Well, I was raised very well on black and white film. And Laurence Olivier was my first Mr. Darcy, and that was it. From that point on, I was like, who is this Mr. Darcy? And so the story was fascinating to me. And then reading it, I was kind of a precocious reader. So from short black and white movie to here's the whole book. And my initial response to the whole book was, what do you mean there's not a kiss? There's not a kiss. It was a kiss in the movie. And of course, there wouldn't have been something written about that, knowing, what we know now about the era.
Yeah.
So it was kind of just my back door was movies. So once I fell in love with that character and then realized more about who she was, when she wrote, and all these different things, and then also a tragically short life, it had all of the markings of her own heroine, her own stories. And of course, it just elicits a great deal of curiosity in those of us who are like, what if I could write like that as a young girl? It was immediately like, well, what if I could grow up and be the next Jane Austen for this era? But I didn't think anything romantic about the era in which I was living because we're too close to it.
Yeah, it's interesting because she's seen as this, romantic writer, but really her stories have very little actual romantic banter or dialogue in them. Very little. Emma has the most because the couple spends the most time together.
Yeah.
Of any of them. And so it's just kind of fascinating. Like, she loves doing, like, in Pride and Prejudice when he proposes the second time, and she says something like, he said what was appropriate for a man desperately in love. And I'm like, no, I don't know what he said.
Yeah, that sustaining the maintaining the privacy of the characters.
Yeah.
For in the time in which it was written. So,
but I think you could make the argument, though, and I've always said this, that they're just as much coming of age stories as they are actually romance stories.
I don't know. I'll play devil's advocate on this.
Yeah.
Because how they perceived romance and if you will, there was this school of thought somewhat in that era. You write this way, and it could be considered a romance to a point, but a romance could also be considered trashy novel. What is our term, if you're writing something salacious, back then it was kissing in the book. Oh my goodness, that will corrupt the young ladies who read it. They shall become hedonistic in their desires. So it's hard for us to gauge it. I agree that it's a coming of age, and even more importantly than being a quote romance by our modern standards, it shows us character. Character is behind everything, the flawed character, the change of character. And while there is something romantic that happens, I believe Jane was as in love with her characters and who they were as to create these memorable novels. If they were, I hate to say it like this, but if they were just a romance.
Because I think that they are romances. I don't think that they're not romances, but I think that they are almost just as much coming of age, because that was the choice that these women had. was who they were. I mean, that was by far the biggest choice that these women had, was who they were going to marry. And when you think about it, the women that she portrays are incredibly bold for that time period. I mean, for Lizzie to reject Collins alone was, he even tells her that you may never get another proposal, may never come to you. So for her to refuse and not do what Charlotte does is very bold. And she's not like Emma, where she, could be, she is a lady of means, Emma is.
Family is hanging on the potential of
so
what
for
she
her
could
to
decide.
Refuse Darcy is especially crazy. Like, I don't think as a modern reader we like really contextualize like what she did there.
Well, I think that's a really important point, and I think that is kind of the parallel that exists with the series that we watched.
Yeah,
is we want to show what life was like for these women and try to find a place of relatability. And I think my own lack of relatability to that was some of the things that got in the way of either my enjoyment of it at times or my frustration with it. Right? Because when we think about, just let's go back in time for just to my, my humble beginnings, not that long ago, but my generation, growing up as a little girl in the late 60s, early 70s, this was a time in which women, if they worked, it was like, I wonder why she has to work. Where's her man? Why is he not providing? And you couldn't get a credit card or a bank account without a man signing for it when I was a little girl. That's not that distant. I'm still sprightly and young.
That's interesting.
And, if we think about it, in my lifetime, the ability to be an independent woman, we're not so far removed in some respects from Jane Austen's time. I can now go, if I just want to live on my own, I can get my own house. Someone will sell me a house. I can have a credit card. I can own land. Woo-de-doo. This is within a lifetime. So I may not have a great personal experience of it, but this was the norm. If you didn't have a man caring for you, you were at the whim of whomever decided.
Yeah.
And that was like terrible to witness.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's what makes her books so engaging, is that she is commenting on all of that. She's aware of all that. And that's what makes it so funny and enticing and makes her character so strong, is because they're butting up against that, and it makes you root for them.
And maybe that's what else makes it so timeless, because it was appealing when it came out and perhaps shocking at points where they're like, she said no to who? Pemberley, what? That has persisted still.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I first discovered, I think the very first Jane Austen thing I ever experienced was probably Clueless, was the first thing, actually. And then, of course, the 95, Pride and Prejudice, and the Sense and Sensibility. So those things, but it wasn't until I was I went to community college my senior year of high school. And so I had like a month off for winter break. And I read in 1 month, I read Pride and Prejudice, or Sense and Sensibility, Pride and Prejudice, and Persuasion in 1 month, because I just got obsessed. And then, of course, I've read them all. And for a long time, I read all 6 every year for, like my late 20s, early 30s. Then I can't do that now with the podcast, but I love her writing. And there's almost a side of me that's like, is it a cliche to, everyone likes Austen, but I should like dig deeper into the tombs of British literature, and find more obscure people. But I don't know, like if I am, oftentimes I'll be looking through my, my Kindle or my Audible, and if I don't have something I have to read for the podcast, I'm like, well, I'll just turn on Pride and Prejudice and listen to that, or read that,
for someone read that to you who has a beautiful voice.
Yeah.
And you just immerse yourself in the era, fall back into that time.
Yeah.
I love the manners. I love how still very relatable and human
Funny.
the characters are, and how she has no hesitation to point
Mm-hmm.
up what is ridiculous. And I love that aspect of it.
There were probably, I would say that, I mean, Sense Sensibility, because I am really close with my just younger sister, 2 years younger, and her and I are very different. We do have a bit of an Eleanor Marianne dynamic kind of going on sometimes. But I related to Pride and Prejudice too, because I have, I have 3 sisters, there's 4 of us. So definitely like Sense Sensibility. And then I would say other books that were really Little Women and Anne of Green Gables. Those are probably like the holy trilogy.
Why we're soul sisters, right? That's what we're like, yeah.
That's probably for me. But yeah, I loved reading her. I just remember reading Sensibility for the first time and just being like, this is such a great book.
Yeah. And I would say if you have not, dear listener, read Sense and Sensibility, it has such heart and depth and conflict. As much as I absolutely adore Sense and Sensibility, Emma Thompson, Kate Winslet, I will watch it. That's I will watch that every year easily, more than once. And just if I'm depressed or fussy or moody or life is just, it's been bad, I can just be like, there we go. All is right with the world. I can just soak this in. I'll probably watch it tonight and pop popcorn. It's just such a wonderful show to see. But the book
is great.
Gives you so much more interesting depth. It really does. They're all worth the read, without a doubt.
Definitely. I'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's Utah local indie romance author Rainy Dang and her new novel, Miss Nguyen's Bodyguard. This novel brings a Vietnamese love story to life. For her safety, Claire Nguyen is sharing an isolated cabin with her family's brooding bodyguard, Cage, and he is doing all he can to keep his hands off her while under the watchful eyes of the security cameras. Will Claire be able to open her dream bookstore and live the humble life she craves? Or will she face the daunting task of continuing her parents' multi-billion-dollar legacy? Either way, will she be able to keep Cage in the process? Rated 4 out of 5 chili peppers. This one's got a little bit of spice, but it's a lot of fun. So you should definitely check it out. Use the affiliate link below. It's Miss Nguyen's Bodyguard by Rainy Dang. Well, let's dive into this series. So this Miss Austen, this is a 4-part series on Masterpiece at PBS. And it was an adaptation of Andrea Gibb novel. It was an adaptation by Andrea Gibb of the novel Miss Austen by Gil Hornby, and then directed by Aisling Walsh, and it stars Keeley Hawes and Jessica Hines. And I'm not sure how to say the young lady. It's like, I think it's a Norwegian or Swedish name. Snove Carlson as young Cassie. And then Patsy Farron as young Jane Austen, or as Jane Austen. Patsy Farron is Jane Austen. Yeah, so I feel a little bit conflicted about this show because I did want to like it more than I ended up actually liking it. I mean, I thought we were going to cover every single episode and do a recap, and I was going to just love it because there were such great things out of the UK, huge, great reviews. But I just found it pretty dry. I was just not that engaged. I was like, oh, I just don't know if there's enough story here. And a side of me kind of wondered if they should have fictionalized. I haven't read this novel, but I'm like, should they have fictionalized it more? Like made it?
That's a really good question. I asked myself a similar thing. So that begs the good question, the very meaty topic of why didn't we engage? I have a couple theories as far as what I know why I didn't. And some of it was may have been the story, may have been, and some of it may be the directorial style.
Well, and it's like, should they have just made it one movie? Was there just not enough story here for 4 hours? I mean, she lived a very, like, it's a hard thing because I
think it could have
we want, because her
part 1, part 2, probably.
Yeah, like her writing is so good that we want, because even that Anne Hathaway movie, Becoming Jane, that was also kind of boring. I think we want to ascribe like this exciting life for her, but wasn't she a daughter of a pastor? I mean, it's just a very like simple life, just writing and her, relationship with her sisters and things. It just not a lot of like meat on the bones as far as the narrative there.
I think that we care so much about Jane, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is enough for us to say we want to know more, and the relationship of a sister, and all the things that potentially what happened and why to these 3,000 letters. What was in it that was so terrible? And I don't know that this story answered that in such a way strong enough, right? Strong enough that we genuinely cared. Here's the crux of my disappointment in it. If you have a central character, Cassandra, and if it doesn't feel like what the choices she's making are really clear and really truly for Jane, her sister's benefit, if it just looks like stupidity, I'm sorry. I'm going to pull a little Ghostbuster quote here. This is the tangent will make sense. In the Ghostbuster movie, we hear the famous quote, which we quote frequently. If someone asks you if you're a god, you say yes.
Right.
I tie this into, if Mr. Hobday asks you to marry him, you say yes. Because I mean, he was like a god among men as far as his qualities as a potential husband. Would he have cared for Jane? Would he be able to take care of Cassandra? All of these things, plus he's Max Irons.
Yeah, I was confused by that. Like,
that motivation made me go, Cassie, you're just dumb then.
Did she? Because she says, I did this for you. I did this for Jane. And I was confused by that because I was like, yeah, you're right. Because it's like, well, because she felt like Jane needed companionship.
Right. And Jane was pushing her towards happiness.
Well, and that's why she also
ostensibly, frequently.
Yeah. I mean, that's why she also doesn't agree to stay with the brother when the sister-in-law dies. He asks, will you stay? And she says, no, I can't leave Jane.
Well, and I think, yes, caring for Jane, knowing Jane was important to her as a motivation. We can support that. But if that is the motivation, I must care and support Jane. The way in which Hobday was portrayed as a self-made man and a man of means, what would have, and knowing that men were intrinsically important in preserving your own independence and safety, then why not turn to this handsome, charming, intelligent, kind Mr. Hobday as the means? Would he protect Jane? Would he help Jane? That's the problem. We see it as not helpful for Jane, as well as not helpful for Cassie. And if he had been, like, let's say Mr. Hobday was impoverished, and there was no way, as much as love existed, there was no way. That would have been a conflict. We would have been like, dang, and he's so wonderful. Maybe he could have taken care of just her, but a whole family, or her and Jane. If that had been clear, we would have said, well, that makes sense, because he could not manage the burden of caring for a wife and a sister and but that was not clear. And
well, it made me think about, have you seen the play Silent Sky?
Know it, have not seen it.
Okay. Well, spoiler for the play, but so in that play, they have this, it's about this woman, Henrietta Leavitt, who was this astronomer at Harvard.
Oh, yes. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And in that play, they have this whole romance as like a major aspect of the play and the story. And that she had this romance with this coworker. And it's like a big part of the play. And it turns out that it's all fake. They made it all up. Like, she didn't have that relationship with him. And I think that probably the playwright, Lauren Gunderson, was probably like, she just went to work like every day, and like looking at the sky is important, and what she uncovered was very important, but like where's the narrative, like where's the and so that's probably why she added that in to give some thrust to the story. But then as somebody who's now seen it a number of times, I look back and I'm like, well, that kind of sucks. Like it was all fake. Like but so I'm a little torn, and it kind of made me think of it. I'm like, should they have done something like that with this? Just it's based on a novel anyway.
Yeah, we're fictionalizing things. I don't know how much the novel showed us, but when you have your heroine who I mean, we care enough about it to have an opinion, right? But it's also because we invest time and effort in our love for Jane Austen. We want to experience this, and her saying no to Mr. Hobday, Cassandra Austen, is not an Elizabeth making a daring Darcy choice.
Yeah,
it's played too real. There's too much at stake. And if I were to be callous, in my opinioning, I would have been like, gosh, I could name this series Cassie Austen Throws Away Happiness with Both Hands all the time. And you're like, but if you can't see that and go, no, I see the decision. I will say this, backing up on my opinionatedness, the love and the companionship and the dedication that was between Cassandra and Jane was real. The ladies who played, whether it's Sinave and Patsy, the reality of how they portrayed that relationship did make you think, okay, if I had to choose, I can choose this and have a happy, fulfilled life being with this beloved sister. It was only because Mr. Hobday seemed like the perfect way to help that sister and herself that it made the motivation hard. But as far as the believability of the family and the characters and how much you wanted them to have happiness, was definitely there. Definitely there. And I have two other little favorite parts that I picked out of but I'm curious what your favorite parts were, because we know it was kind of like I wanted to like this so much more.
Yeah, it definitely was. Did you have any preference of the older, like Cassandra, or the flashback sequence? Did you like one more than the other?
Actress wise, or just
in story, because like so Cassandra, she's going to help Isabella, who is her niece. Isabella, yes, her niece. She's going to help Isabella. She's basically, her father at the beginning is sick on death's bed. Her father says, please help Isabella to find a place, because he was a reverend, and the new reverend is going to come in and take over. So she's going to have to move. So that's sort of and there's like a little romance for Isabella, and then her relationship with her sister Beth. So there's that kind of whole plot going on. And then everything with the letters. And then the flashbacks is the relationship between Cassandra and Jane. And in particular, Cassandra's, I guess, love affairs first with Tom, who's her great love, who goes out to sea, and he's a goner as soon. Like, oh no.
Oh yeah, it was a you could hear the theme music without the theme music.
Yeah.
Like, all right, see ya, sailor.
Yeah, it's like the yeah, he's not going to be long for this world. But it's like the drummer in Spinal Tap. You're like, oh no.
Red shirt in Star Trek. Oh, you're going to the Caribbean. Yeah. And you're telling her, make sure you marry if I die. Well, I can see on the not so distant horizon, your death is looming, sir.
Yes. It's almost like a Monty Python skit.
I cannot say that I have a preference, because I think both actresses had to fill the role of the quiet supporting Cassandra, self-sacrificing, and so I would have loved to have seen Keeley Hawes, who played the if you will, the decision-making Cassandra, who is now in her middle years, I would have liked to have seen her have a little of that snap and sassiness that Jane Austen did, a little bit of that meddlesome, I'll just annoy you because I can. But she was kind of neutral. And I would have been so much more in the face of some of these people that were so difficult and so unkind. She was very kind but neutral, and you felt for her. But between the two, they were so neutral, both of them, that I couldn't say that I liked one over the other. I can say that I thought Patsy Farron, just as a passionate but also melancholy Jane, was fascinating in her own way. It was interesting to see her portrayed kind of as a moody artist that wasn't quite sure of herself, but also was passionate about her writing. I loved her intelligent wit. I don't know how accurate, because we don't know, right? That's the loss of those letters. We don't know. We only have her books. Who was the real Jane? How was she really with her family?
Yeah, and it's really interesting if you look at Jane Austen, because if you look at the teenage little novellas, Lady Susan, Love and Friendship, that she wrote, they really is an acid tongue to those ones. Yeah, funny, very like but by the end you have Persuasion, which they bring up the most in this series of all of her books, which makes sense, because it's dealing with the passage of time, and that book deals with the passage of time so much. But you just think of like Anne Elliot is basically kind of a perfect, she doesn't have that, like, certainly doesn't have that acid tongue. She's very like sweet and quiet and kind of, she's persuadable. I mean, that's what makes
I
her
think
work.
that this was where the author and even perhaps the director was trying to pull a tangent, that Cassandra was an Anne Elliot.
Yeah.
That in her self-sacrificing and her willingness, this is why she was reading Persuasion, why she had a life that but she wasn't persuaded. She persuaded herself. So she was less of, she made weak choices in my eyes at times, compared to she was influenced at a young age.
Yeah.
So there was less of that heroine tragic. She's been acted upon as Moses. Well,
yeah.
Do
you think that's why Jane is so angry at her when she refuses Abde? It's because she's basically saying, you're doing what Anne did at the beginning of the story.
I think she's angry that she's making a foolish victim choice. Tom is gone and done. He had his life, and you're choosing out of fear, you're choosing out of some selfish motivation to preserve your life through me. Who knows why she was choosing it, but Jane could not get it. It was like, why would you do this? And I think that was valid. I will say that the persuasion element, if we were really drawing these comparisons, and there were moments throughout that were just like this from the Jane Austen books, these are things, which I loved. I loved that part. I think the little bit with Persuasion at the end was,
I mean, it makes sense because it was her last book. So, like, of course,
sure,
she's going to, so it would make sense for the story as well. But
the
also,
little staircase scene was one of the things that I liked. Although I would have done it a little bit differently. I thought they still played it a bit serious. And Jane is not, her books don't always have an incredibly serious tone. They're serious subjects, they're serious situations, but they have levity and cleverness. And I wish that this whole series had just given us some levity and cleverness besides just Jane. We just
it was a little,
Jane needed a little more levity and cleverness to make me feel like I was really seeing Jane.
I agree.
We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies merch store.
Are you looking for that perfect gift for the postable, hardy, or Hallmarky in your life?
What about getting that t-shirt or hoodie that will help you stand out at your next holiday party?
Now is the time to check out the Hallmarkies merch store.
Full of festive designs by artists like Jessica Miller, Carrie from Hallmark Comics, and more.
You can even have more than just shirts, but totes, cell phone cases, notebooks, mugs, and more.
And it isn't just Hallmark. We have designs for Anna Green Gables, Man from Snowy River, The Nanny, and more.
Every purchase at the merch store goes to help support the podcast and allows us to make the great content you know and love.
There are frequent sales, so go to tpublic.com/stores/hallmarkies or see the link in the description.
That's tpublic.com/stores/hallmarkies.
So they really do lean into the persuasion when the maid or Dinah, passes out, falls down the stairs, and then they have to send for I'm getting my so she passes out, and then they have to send for Mr. Litterdale to go and help because he's a surgeon, and to go and help her. And so that is used because this is the more modern time period. Sorry, it gets a little confusing talking about it sometimes.
Yeah, the back and forth of it.
And so Cassie sees that Isabella is doing what she did to Jane, but she doesn't realize it until she talks to Beth, and Beth is like, "Oh, I'm not the one interested in this surgeon. It's Isabella." And
there was some redemption by her niece,
so
and that was good.
Yes. And so this whole thing, anyway, he ends up coming and helping, and then they end up getting together and everything. But it was very leaned into that she was basically Louisa Musgrove from Persuasion, in that situation, that she fell off of the height. And
I would have played that for a little bit more comedy and a little less seriousness. I would have been Dinah's the sassy sort of maid that would have been like, I'll throw myself down the stairs to save my mistress. And then she's like, "Are you okay?" "Oh, I'm fine."
Yeah.
I would have played it a little bit more, that lifting of that laughter and maneuvering people to get them together. All of those things, that matchmaking, the right person ends with the right person. And I will say that Rose Leslie, who played Isabella, famous quick, easy reference, nothing, Jon Snow, the beautiful redhead. She was very subdued and quiet and loving, and you wanted her to succeed. She didn't have quite the gumption. And I needed somebody in there to have some gumption, other than the mean-spirited ones.
And I think they could have leaned more into the writing that they did. Yes, they're using persuasion as themes for the story, but I would have loved to have seen her like having a meeting with her publisher, or even if it's fictionalized, that just, or
have an argument with their sister about plot.
Yeah.
Or something interesting.
Or like, I don't know, you could just make up a scene. I like that somebody wanted her to use a pseudonym or something. Like, I don't feel like something like that would be such a flight of fancy that people would be like offended, like have some kind of scene about like her experience writing, and even if it is some window
into Jane's world. I mean, I too would have loved to have seen that. My other thing that was a more directorial choice that got me, and this might be just me and my own how would I have staged it sort of perspective. The letters. Now the letters are formative, right? These were the inspiration for writing this and creating this as a series, as a book, as an adaptation. What happened to the 3,000 letters? And that's
a lot of letters,
a driving force. This is like the mystery of, and here's my problem. So you got all these letters, and you got mean-spirited Mary, who's like, I'm just going to take these letters and I'm going to make money off of them. And I'm just going to, where are the letters? And she was just, if she'd been looking for the letters, Eliza's letters, she probably would have found them. But I digress. But now Cassandra, our heroine, has the letters. And what does she do with them? She hides them, sort of. Like the camera will show a corner of a letter sticking out from the mattress, or an open drawer. And I know, or I believe, that the director was like, you see, this is tension. Because will she find the letters? They're right there. You can see them. No, that's called, would any human be that stupid? If I'm trying to keep it away from Mary, would it be like, there's the corner of the letter? It just looked like carelessness.
Right.
And it was annoying, not tense. And I think that could have been played differently. Mm-hmm. Or I would have had Mary get them. I would have had Mary abscond with them and have Cassandra have to find a way to retrieve them.
Yeah, and it would have that. Yeah, and I would have had, they did read from some of the letters, but I would have liked them to be even dishier. Like, again, you could make it however you want. We don't have them. So, of course, it's going to be fictionalized. So make her like I don't know, just saying something catty about the queen or just whatever, like something that would be like, okay, I see why they were like, whoa, that's a lot, or
well, and the broken engagement.
Yes. So that
play
is
that up a bit.
Yes. So that's in that's in what's that, episode 3? Yeah, she gets engaged in episode 3, then she quickly changes her mind, which is accurate to her life. She did briefly get engaged.
I really liked the fact that that Jane does have a really high opinion of love and is driven by it in her writing, which makes it so believable for us that read it to believe that. So to me, that's also the question, what were the examples of that Jane saw in reality in her own life of both the bad, the less than ideal marriage, the disrespect, what were those things? But what made her have that ideal? What made her believe that anything is better than a marriage without respect? Did she see a love match? Did she really get to experience that through the eyes of people she cared about? And if not, what made her so certain it existed? Because you kind of almost have to know it, you got to write it, you've got to know it to an extent. And it makes me wonder, back to that Jane Hathaway sort of thing, Anne Hathaway, becoming Jane, you believe that Jane could have had a deeply meaningful relationship that didn't happen. Did she love and did it not happen? Did she have a Marianne moment where she could have had this love, and because of money and circumstances, she did not?
And why was
those are things that I would have liked to have seen in the letters.
Yeah. Well, and why wasn't she more sort of pressured? Why didn't she have a Charlotte Lucas moment where she feels this pressure that she needs to, I guess because she had her writing, but they could have dove into that, I think, more.
I think they tried to, but they half tried to. So we didn't get the full measure of her willingness to compromise on her ideals for the sake of the Charlotte Lucas moment and come to her senses not because she didn't mean it, or overnight I changed my mind, I sobered up because I had too much wine at dinner, but more from the standpoint of, I would rather be alone. A strong feminine hero who would say, I would rather be alone than to marry and find myself an unhappy wife.
Yeah.
I mean, she did make that discovery in the series. It just wasn't played up enough, in my opinion. I think.
Yeah.
So maybe this is an American opinion that we'd like to see a little heightened emotion, and in the UK, it's like.
Yeah. So she was engaged for one night to Harris Big Wither in December 1802. She accepted his proposal during a visit with friends, but the next morning she withdrew her consent.
Well, nothing speaks truer than true.
Yeah.
Stranger than fiction is the truth that we see. So that's good to know. I think here's my advice. Anyone who wants to see it, I mean, you already know the ending. Jane Austen dies a very death. The letters get burned. We know the facts of history. And if you want to see and appreciate the show, I would say do more research on the truth of, because then when you see it play out, you can go, oh, that really happened. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I mean,
I would say, like, if you want to watch the show, because I think in general it is well made, it's well acted, it's a well done show, but you just have to kind of know going into it. So we can help you here. You have to know going into it that it's more just like spending time with these people. Like it's almost like a fly on the wall, a slice of life, type. But it's Jane Austen. There's just not a ton of plot. And so you just, because she lived a very simple life. Like there's just, I think we want these people that we love. We was like, oh, we want to tell their stories, but like, what if their stories were just not cinematic,
Well, and I think the cinematography or the cinematographic aspect, the big parts are these broad strokes of what life was like. And I think for me, my biggest takeaway was, like we talked at the beginning, okay, so I have had the freedom in my life to choose to be married and choose to not be married. and then choose someone in my life that fulfills my desire for a real companionship. I have a wonderful marriage. I have a truly Austen level husband. He's truly wonderful, and he's perfect for me. But I had the freedom. And even if I had never met him, I have the freedom to do and travel and be whatever I want, even with the difficulties we face and the ridiculousness of our current society in certain ways that still exist. I still have more freedom and more abilities than these women did. They were absolutely shackled to masculine whim and will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that was a tough thing to watch.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's true. And it is kind of like sobering to think of like what they had to experience in order for us to have what we have, and then it makes it all the more amazing that her books still hold up to this day. And would you think that if she was writing Sense and Sensibility about her and Cassandra, which one is Eleanor? Which one is Marianne? Because she's in a way the more independent one, but she's also like Cassandra is also a little bit more the free spirit in certain ways, with this love and Tom and everything. And she's a little more sensible in some ways, kind of like Eleanor. Jane.
I would say that they're kind of a hybrid of each other, the best points, on both sides. But if you think about it, Jane had the wisdom of Eleanor, but the sensibility and the passion of Marianne. She never had the opportunity to find either a Willoughby or a Colonel Brandon or, a Mr. Ferrers, and more's the pity. But Jane, to me, had so much of all those qualities. It left Cassandra neither sensible nor full of sensibility, because this is the base problem with the show again, is Cassandra was not her own heroine in the story, that she was a victim of herself. And had she been self-sacrificing like Eleanor, I see that this is how it is. I will be his friend anyway. I will help him to happiness because it is the right and noble thing to do. That kind of strength of character is different than I have an opportunity, I'm just going to throw it away. It didn't feel the same. So for me, Jane wins. She's all the heroines. And Cassandra had the opportunity to be her own heroine. And
Well, I'll be very curious what the listeners think about this show, what they think about all the things we've discussed, what you think about Jane Austen. I will be very interested. So let me know what you think. Put in the comments section. I actually didn't go fresh on this show for Rotten Tomatoes because I just felt like the pacing, it just was too slow for me. But it's not awful. That's the problem with Rotten Tomatoes. People think if you didn't go fresh, you absolutely hated it. That's not true. But yeah,
it just didn't tip into it's
no,
not quite the
do a recommendation. But I'd be very curious what the listeners think of it. So put in the comment section or on Twitter. And where can people follow you? Are you on social media at all?
Actually, I'm going to be, and when I am, I will let the listeners know. I've kind of been busy with my own private work, but I've decided to step into my own little limelight. I am going to start doing some of the really cool performance costumes that I do on Instagram and TikTok. I'm going to start showing that creative side of it, and then, of course, as I continue to write and do more, I'm going to have more information out there as well. I think. I had my costume shop for 10 years and that was my spotlight, and stuff just kind of happened along. And with that, when I did radio, I didn't have to worry about creating my own spotlight. But now I got to go say, geez, if I'm going to be out there, you got to.
Well, I guess we just. What do you think of the costumes? Did you think it was?
I get kind of picky on certain things. Overall, I didn't. I liked that it was natural fabrics. It looked like it was what it should be. I liked that we could see the different eras and the different costumes. You could tell that where you were in timeline if you pay attention to those kind of costume details. There were only a couple of times I was like, how would they have sewn that? I don't think they would have. Very minor things. But overall, color scheme, quality of costumes, and the way the colors told the story, excellent work.
Excellent. Very good. Very good. Well, you can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all over social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. And also, you can find me on Stage Blog, and I'll put a link down to the episode we did on Jane Austen for that podcast. It was really fun. We had you on, and then we had Melissa Leone Larson, who has done 2 adaptations of Jane Austen, Persuasion and Pride and Prejudice, that are great. So it was fun to have both of you on that episode. So you should check that out. And if you are listening on iTunes, please leave your ratings and reviews. That helps so much. It helps the algorithm so much. Please, please, please. And if you are watching on YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And we have a playlist with all of our Jane Austen content. We have covered tons of Jane Austen on this podcast. So you should definitely check that out. I'll have that in the description. And we have our merch store where we even have some we have some Jane Austen inspired merch in the merch store, so check that out. And our patron group, that's the biggest way you can support everything that we're doing. You get to be part of watch alongs every month, or Q&As from talent. It's really fun. I really try to make it very worth your while. You get early episodes, bonus episodes. So check out the Patreon. I would really appreciate it. And thanks so much. This was so much fun. And we'll talk to you all later. Bye.